Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show. As we are always bringing on people who speak the truth and get to the root cause of the problems, I'm honored today to have our guest, Corey DeAngelis. He has been named one of the thought leaders and influencers on the right in comparison with Matt Walsh, Chris Rufo, Robbie Starbuck. So major players. He is a major player on the scene of holding education accountable and school choice. So I will let him explain further. Corey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm just going to kick it off with, I feel like school quality has always been an issue. My parents were both teachers, education was a top priority. But in the last 5 years, and it's really become an issue. What accelerated people's interest in this and their concern with the quality of kids' education?
Well, we can thank the school closer, Randy Weingarten, for hurting kids, showing families what was happening in the classroom through Zoom school. The teachers unions really overplayed their hand during the COVID era. We had 0 states with universal school choice, meaning everybody's eligible in 2020. But after that, when families woke up and started pushing back, fighting back at the school board meetings, making their voices heard, going to state capitals, pushing for the funding to follow the student, conservatives were upset with the far left radical ideology in the schools. They didn't like the gender ideology. They were upset with critical race theory, uh, dividing students based on immutable characteristics. And they had had enough. I mean, for a long time, the unions told them if they were upset with what was happening in the classroom, they could just go to the school board meeting, things would change, they just make their voices heard, and everything would be fine and dandy. We saw that process of so-called democratic accountability just did not work out all that well. These families had their mics cut off. They were labeled as domestic terrorists by the Biden administration, invoking the Patriot Act of all things. I mean, it's insane how far the establishment went to try to bully and silence parents into submission. Thankfully, their plan backfired and families awakened like a sleeping giant
Mhm.
to push for reform. And politicians were put on watch. We saw one in Virginia, for example, Terry McAuliffe. He was the former governor running again, basically an incumbent, who had said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. It was a bold strategy, Cotton. It didn't work out for him. And
Yeah.
Glenn Youngkin, the Republican in a deep blue state, went 10 points to Biden the previous year. Glenn Youngkin won on parental rights and education. So that we've seen a huge seismic shift to the right. The GOP has emerged as the parents' party on education,
Mhm.
and we're winning so much, Molly. I'm almost getting tired of winning. It's been a sea change, and the wind is at our back.
Yeah, winning is so good. And I think that's kind of my perception of it. But again, I don't have children. I'm not following education at that level. But kids were at the dining room tables and their parents were in the home hearing what they were being taught, right? This is really what accelerated that.
Well, and look what happened. Like they just really beclown themselves time after time again. It's like they've been so drunk on power, they could not reverse course. They just leaned into it. They quadrupled down in their anti-parent rhetoric. You even had the Chicago Teachers Union, one of the most influential labor unions in the country. They tweeted out in 2021, quote, that the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. They threw every lefty buzzword at the wall to see what would stick, to try to keep the schools closed so that they could hold children's education hostage to secure billions of dollars in ransom payments from taxpayers. You think about Randy Weingarten, who makes over $600,000 a year, the head of the teachers union, who just announced a partnership to create curriculum with the World Economic Forum. I mean, you almost can't make this stuff up. It's beyond absurd, but they lobbied the CDC to make it more difficult to reopen schools. I mean, they hate kids, they love money, and they love themselves.
Since you brought up the name, I have a post ready to share here. This is a famous tweet. You know, this is embarrassing. This is the president of the teachers union that doesn't know how to spell 4th of July. And I love it. You highlighted this. She re-edited it like 4 times.
3 ti yeah, 3, 4 yeah, 4th time's a charm. 4RTH. She can't spell that, or she was really drunk on the morning of 4th of July, very upset about all the losing that's been happening on her side. I mean, we've had 17 states, Molly, passed universal school choice since 2021. We've had more advancement on school choice in the past 4 years than in
Yeah.
the preceding 4 decades. And Randy Weingarten hates that more than anything else because it threatens her power. It threatens her government school monopoly, where in the status quo, if you don't have school choice, the unions run the show. Parents are left in the dark and they're powerless. We saw this with COVID when the schools were closed. Parents, they got the short end of the stick. They were basically trying to figure out homeschooling on the fly, either that or they were paying out of pocket for private education while their government schools were closed. The cash kept flowing through the property tax system to those closed systems, which, by the way, the government school monopoly, the teachers' unions have just become nothing more than a money laundering operation for the Democrat Party. You look at Randy's union, most recent election cycle, 99.89% of their campaign contributions from the American Federation of Teachers went to Democrats the last election cycle. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's a money laundering operation. It ought to be illegal. And at the very least, we should defang these unions. And there are bills in Congress right now to do so. For example, there's one to revoke the federal charter of the National Education Association. They're the largest labor union in the country, the only union that has a special privilege, this special status called a federal charter. They got the backing of Congress, the backing of the federal government, and they've had one since 1906, over 100 years. They shouldn't have it anymore. They've strayed so far from their original mission. If we saw their handbook that I leaked to the public, it's almost 500 pages. They tried to scrub the internet, but it's because it was seeped in political activism. It had nothing to do with education. They were passing resolutions this year at their annual convention to label Trump a fascist. In that resolution, they misspelled the word fascism, of course, because I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's beyond parody. It's basically a Babylon Bee headline in real time. But they misspelled the word. They also dedicated hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight against parental rights to get around a recent Supreme Court decision, Mahmoud v. Taylor, which allows families to pull their kids out of gender ideology instruction all across the country. The NEA wasn't happy about that because they want to infiltrate the school system to control the minds of other people's children to shape the direction of this country in their socialist worldview. But hopefully they lose because families are not having it anymore. A lot of parents who thought maybe their public schools were fine because their kid was doing well on their report card. They had all A's. Their SAT scores were fine. But families started to see that it's not just all test scores. There's an ideological rot in the government school system where they're subverting the will of parents, training these ideological foot soldiers to go out and vote for people like Mamdani in New York City, an out and out socialist. How do you think he got into power? How do you think he's in first place? Well, it's because you have people going to government schools for 13 years of their lives for 7 hours a day, learning that big government's the solution to all of their problems. The way we fight back and strike at the root is to empower parents, one, with school choice, but also to empower parents, uh, uh, not just with school choice, but to empower teachers with the ability to exit their unions and stop funneling this money to Democrat campaign coffers through the unions. And a lot of teachers are waking up at the Teacher Freedom Alliance right now, where post Janus, there was this a Supreme Court decision in 2018 called the Janus decision, where now no teachers union can mandate that public employees pay them union dues as a condition of employment. So basically, every state is almost a right to work state now where teachers can opt out. They can get the personal liability insurance from the Teacher Freedom Alliance for free. Donors are covering it right now. And you can pocket more of that funding that would have otherwise gone to the NEA. You think about it, do the math on this. The NEA, on average, their dues are about $1,000 a year. And I saw a recent survey from Education Week showing that only 41% of educators identified as Democrats. The other 59% were they're independent, third party, or Republican, if 59% of the NEA's members opted out who aren't Democrats, who don't want to continue funding the Democrat Party, at $1,000 a piece, that's about $1.7 billion because they have about 3 million members right now at the NEA. It's a behemoth. I mean, they have so much influence, not because they're smart, not because they have logical arguments, but because they use their political muscle to force things through. And it became so obvious in 2019. They failed to pass a resolution to rededicate themselves to being about student learning. Yet this year, they passed all of these far left resolutions that read more like an act of war, a declaration of war on the Trump administration than anything else. And they also had one person they elevated. I just got to bring this up. Her name is Ashley Crossan. They picked as their teacher of the year at the NEA. Out of their 3 million members, they picked this one person who goes up at their annual convention last month and declared that her job as a teacher of all things was quote unquote deeply political and always had been. And she was bragging about that. She wasn't saying that this was a problem in the NEA. She was saying, this is fantastic. I found my people in the union who agree with me that teaching should be deeply political. And if that doesn't raise the alarm bells and get families to wake up, I don't know what will, because this is free advertising for school choice and homeschooling, which homeschooling has at least doubled since pre-pandemic levels. So you play stupid games, Randy Weingarten, you win stupid prizes. There's a mass exodus from the government school system happening right before our eyes, and it's because the unions stepped on a rake. They shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah. Well, I feel like sending children to public school under the current situation is extremely dangerous. I'm looking at something you retweeted here. Chicago Democrat sounds alarm as 55 schools report no proficiency in math or reading. So basically, it's not they're teaching school and, oh, by the way, we're going to get you political as well. They have replaced the fundamental education that people need to function in society with all this woke nonsense and politics.
That's right. If you look at the trends over time, the outcomes haven't gotten better. You cited the Chicago report, 55 Chicago public schools with not a single kid proficient in math, not a single child, 0% proficiency rates. And it's not a money problem. They throw more money at the problem than basically anybody else. They spend about $30,000 per student per year in those failure factories that we call Chicago public schools. And guess what? Their union boss, Stacey Davis Gates, who called school choice racist a couple of years ago, we just found out she sends her kid to a private school herself. School choice for me, but not for thee. They know their institutions that they control with their unions are horrible. They won't even send their own kids there. So they're sending them to private schools that cost half the amount, that cost only about $15,000 per kid. Her own son goes to a school that, yeah, cost half the amount of the public schools. And you look over time, since 1980, the creation of the Department of Education, which we should abolish. The word education is not in the US Constitution. It's therefore a violation of the 10th Amendment. We should get rid of it. It was created as a political payoff by Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, to the teachers union. He wanted the endorsement of the NEA, the National Education Association. So the proof is in the pudding. The outcomes haven't gotten better since the inception. In some cases, they've gotten worse. They've spent about $3 trillion at the federal level since 1980. Per student spending overall has increased about 108% in real terms after adjusting for inflation since 1980. Have the outcomes gotten 108% better? No, they haven't. They've gotten worse. And since the pandemic, there's been decades of learning loss on math and reading. So it's time to wake up, uh, save your kids from this failing system. And even if they're doing okay on math and reading, you have these socialists trying to change everything, to fight back against everything you're doing in the household, to undo your value set and to replace it with someone else's, usually a special interest, Randy Weingarten's. And Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is I think families are not as surprised as they used to be, and we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and to me, the concern is complex because number one, you have the lack of education, which leads to a lifetime lower socioeconomic status, which has health implications. But you have the direct harm component. You have kids in school, you have girls fighting against boys on the transgender side of things. You have an explosion of people who are subject to this trans ideology, which literally is going to lead to physical harm, suicide, things like that, by telling them you're not okay in the skin you were born in. How do we get that out of schools? Like, is it a lost cause at this point, or is it their hope for redemption?
Well, President Trump shows us that there is some hope. He won the parent vote after campaigning against transgender insanity in public schools. He also campaigned on abolishing the Department of Education, returning education to the states. And he also campaigned on nationwide school choice. So he won the parent vote after that. He's on the side of the American public, of the American people. Most families just want the schools to focus on the basics. They want math, reading, and writing.
Yep.
And when they hear about this other stuff happening, it's deeply unpopular with the voting public. If you think about the boys playing in girls sports issue, this is an 80-20 issue. The Republicans are on the right side. If the Democrats are smart, they'll say, I'm not going to let the Republicans pick up the football and win politically on this issue. They will come to the right side of history too. It's taking longer than expected. All the Senate Democrats recently unanimously voted in lockstep together against the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. So we'll see how long it takes. I mean, sometimes they let ideology carry the day and they don't listen to the political will of the people, but that'll change over time. And it usually does on issues like this. So we'll see when we get to a bipartisan coalition of support for school choice, but also support for getting the basics back into the classroom. The other problem, though, is that a lot of these radicals will just try to keep it a secret from parents. They'll say, oh, we're not doing it. And you have some school districts that have explicit policies to keep parents in the dark so that they could protect the kids, in their words. But the parents know their kids more than anybody else. If anything, we need to protect the kids from the radicals in the school system, especially when we have reports going back to 2006 from the Department of Education. A similar study came out that was reported in Psychology Today a couple of years ago, showing that over 10% of kids, over 1 in 10 children in the government school system, will experience some form of sexual misconduct by the educators themselves. There is a sexual abuse epidemic happening in the government school system. That doesn't mean that all of the public schools are doing this, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that one calls for more accountability. In my home state of Texas, we had a representative, Mitch Little, actually passed a bill this year that Governor Abbott signed to kind of clamp down on some of the sexual misconduct happening in the public school system. They used to have uh, uh, protection if you were a public school employee or a public school district, that you could not be sued and be held liable in a civic suit. So that has changed in Texas, thankfully, to Mitch Little and the Republicans, and even some of the Democrats voted for this, for more accountability for this kind of stuff in the public school system. So I have hope. I'm kind of an optimist. And I have reason to be optimistic over the past few years where the political winds are shifting our direction. I mean, we even have people like Josh Shapiro. He's the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania. He even changed his education platform right before the election in 2022 to say he now supports school choice. He doubled down the next year on Fox News, repeating his support for school choice. And this year, after school choice passed in the big beautiful bill, which now all states can basically opt in to have some form of school choice, thanks to Trump's push for it to happen nationwide. The thing is, governors are the ones who get to decide whether your state participates or not. So this allows us to circumvent the union-controlled legislatures in some of these blue states, and maybe governors who are friendly to the issue can opt in. So I'm looking at Josh Shapiro because back when after he won election, he pointed to the Democrat-controlled House as to why school choice didn't get to the finish line. He said, "We can't do this because the House doesn't have the votes. They're controlled by Democrats." And look, he either was telling the truth or he was using that as a convenient excuse to play both sides. But now he can't use that excuse anymore. I don't regardless of the reason, we're gonna see if Josh Shapiro actually supports school choice because it's solely in his hands to make this decision and pull the trigger for families. And look, if he doesn't, this is basically going to end up turning into a situation where blue states subsidize families in red states because everybody can donate to this program and get a tax benefit for doing so, whether you're in California or Texas or Pennsylvania, New York or Florida. But you can only benefit, you can only get the scholarships if your governor decides to opt in. So, Democrat governors, um, you're in a little bit of a sticky situation where if you opt out, you're going to be having your constituents shoot themselves in the foot. So, do the right thing for the people, do the right thing for this country, and opt in.
So, for anyone out there who I mean, I get the idea of school choice, but tell me exactly what that looks like. Is that those dollars follow the student, or the student has the right to enroll wherever they want to? Give me the breakdown of exactly how that works.
Yes, the basic concept is the money following the child. So in the US today, we spend about $20,000 per student per year. That number is about 50 to 60% higher than average private school tuition, which is about $12,000 per student. Obviously, it's higher in some states and higher and lower in other states. That's how averages work. But with school choice, you get to take a portion of that funding that we're already spending. You can take it to your assigned government school if you like. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school, unlike with your doctor. But for real this time. And the public schools do get better in response to competition. That option is still on the table. But if not, you can take a portion of that funding. Typically, it's on average about half of the total. So in Texas, it's a $10,000 scholarship per student in the program that we just passed. And you could take it to pay for private school tuition. You could go to a charter school. You can use it for homeschool curriculum, any type of education provider, pretty broadly defined. And the way that these programs are run today is most of them are called education savings accounts. Much like a health savings account where you can only use that debit card for health purchases, it's an education savings account where you can only use the funding directed by the parent for education related services. So you can't go buy a big screen TV, you can't go buy groceries with it. You have to use it for tutoring or textbooks or private school tuition. And that's the basic concept. The money follows the child. And what's interesting to me is this is the same logic behind a lot of programs that Democrats actually support, yet they vote against it when it comes to school choice. This is why I've come up with the term that we should fund students, not systems, where the money should follow the people, not the buildings. Democrats support Pell Grants for college. These are like school choice, but for college. I mean, Pell Grants are for low income kids, it's taxpayer funding and you can take it to a community college that's nearby if you want, but you don't have to. You can take it to a public or private university. You can even take it to a religiously affiliated university if you want. So the money follows the student's decision. Same thing with pre-K. The money follows the family's decision. You don't have to take it to a government run, residentially assigned pre-K provider. You can take the funding, even with Head Start, that's a federal program, but we have state level programs too that are pre-K initiatives. And you can take that funding to any private provider of pre-K, even religious pre-Ks. And all I'm bringing this up is the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it's the same concept. The money's following that decision. Same thing with SNAP benefits or food stamps. The money goes to the grocery store that you would like to take it to. You don't have to go get government cheese from an assigned grocery store that's run by the federal government. I mean, don't give them any ideas because this is happening with Mamdani in New York City. One of his platform issues is to have government run grocery stores. So I often point out that what the government runs our schools and they do a bad job. Why would we want the government to run? We wouldn't want them to run the grocery stores. So why would we want them to run the schools? And people have told me, well, don't give them any ideas. And it looks like they're picking up the football with those ideas and trying to implement them in deep blue cities, which it's going to be a disaster. We've seen how this works out in socialist countries when government controls the food supply. People are starved to death. Literally, millions of people have died from socialism, from starvation. Our kids are are being robbed of a future and opportunities by being starved of a good education because of socialist run schools. But that's the skinny of it, that the money follows the child, and it's a pretty simple concept. And look, if the public schools are doing a fantastic job, they should have nothing to worry about. The thing is, a lot of families aren't happy with what they're getting.
Yeah. So, one state issue I saw with education is Governor Abbott signed a bill to eliminate cell phones from classrooms. Now, first of all, I don't think that's a gubernatorial issue and should have risen to that level. So, I have some criticisms of that. Is this a net good or net bad? Because I think it's a net good in my gut instinct, but also if there's this sexual abuse and this bullying going on, are we, the argument was we're limiting kids' opportunity to record this and get evidence. So, what's kind of the
Yes. So, I mean, I started on the side of, yeah, technology and being on cell phones too much is probably a bad idea for kids. If they're not focusing in the classroom, how are they going to learn anything? And this is only going to make it harder for them to focus in school and actually learn. But then I saw that Randy Weingarten supported these bills to ban cell phones in the classroom, which got me to thinking, well, why would the unions be against this? And it's aha, right after the election, I was sent some footage from a parent that their child had taken. It was not footage. It was well, some one of the parents sent footage and video, but another one sent just like an audio recording. And they were both from California in the Los Angeles area. One was in Chino Unified School District. Another one was in Moreno Valley Unified School District. And both of them, right after election day, it captured the teachers throwing temper tantrums with their Trump derangement syndrome. One actually said that it's possible that all the kids are going to end up in concentration camps because Donald Trump won the election, directly comparing him to Hitler with this fear mongering. You wonder why anxiety is on the rise with children right now. Probably because we have and these people who belong in an insane asylum running the school system. I mean, look at Becky Pringle at the NEA convention this year. All she did was scream the entire time. And same thing last year. It's just she went viral for saying, "Oh, we got to have all the things," and it's looks like more like a cult than an education gathering. And Becky Pringle also, by the way, makes over $500,000 a year. She is an at-large member at the Democratic National Committee, who, by the way, Randy Weingarten was as well. She recently departed from the DNC after 23 years, and nobody knew about this. The New York Times reported on this like it was no biggie, like everybody knew about it. But people in my circles, I DM'd and said, "Am I missing something here?" Like I thought I should know this since I kind of know all the opposition on Randy Weingarten. Did you guys know this as well? People who are kind of watching this every day like me, and they said, no, I had no idea. And she had this position for 23 years. It goes to show you that the unions are not just a money laundering operation for the Democrat Party. They're also an arm of the Democrat Party. And in many cases, they sit at the table making the decisions with the Democrat Party. I mean, it should be some type of constitutional violation. It seems like a conflict of interest to me. I mean, FDR had it right. He even argued that we shouldn't have public sector unions because of this inherent conflict of interest. They're using the public's taxpayer money to lobby against the public, and they put people in office with their political muscle, the same people that they bargain with at the other side of the table. I mean, it doesn't work like this in the private sector, only in the government sector. And we saw this in Chicago. It's ground zero for this kind of abuse happening where Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson used to be a Chicago Teachers Union organizer right before he ran for mayor. Guess who his number one contributor was? The Chicago Teachers Union. Guess who he bargains with? The Chicago Teachers Union. Guess who he basically pressured to resign the entire school board after he sided with the union calling for a $500 million um, high interest payday loan when the city was already a $500 million in debt. I mean, it just made 0 sense, but, he's gonna do the bidding of the union, where in the private sector, when the union goes to the bargaining table with a manager, they have different views about things, so they come in the middle with an agreement, Whereas with Mayor Brandon Johnson, he's on the same side as the unions and they're bargaining against the taxpayer together. It's a total sham. And it's why for the NEA at least, we should at least revoke their federal charter, or if not, we should use it against them. And there is a bill in Congress to do that as well right now. And the bill is called it's either the Student Act or the Teacher Act. They have these acronyms for these bills, and these are actually good ones. And one of them calls to use that federal charter against them by outlawing or by prohibiting the NEA from engaging in political activity. Aha. That will have the NEA begging Congress to revoke their federal charter because they won't want to have to deal with all of the accountability mechanisms that are supposed to come along with it. So there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the school system, but a lot of good news about school choice and parental rights winning at the Supreme Court and so on and so forth. It's a sign of more things to come as well because we're on the right side of history and parents care about their kids more than anybody else. They're going to beat the unions at their own game. They outnumber the teachers' unions for now, at least. And they're going to fight harder because it's their kids, not the union's kids. Although the unions would disagree with that sentiment. You listen to Stacey Davis Gates in a viral video from a couple weeks ago. The head of the teachers union in Chicago said that they own the Chicago public schools children. And I'm not even taking that out of context. The way it went down was that she said, these conservatives are all, acting like that, Chicago teachers unions think that we own your kids, thinks that they own your kids. And she paused and said, well, we do. We do. And it's just it's evil. Michael Malice said it best. Socialists regard your property as their property, but even more nefariously regard your children as their property. But I don't think families are going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, I certainly hope not. Talk to us a little bit about the Department of Education because Trump ran on the platform. It was going away. I thought it was going away. It hasn't gone away yet. It has not been disbanded. So where are we in that process? Is it going to happen? Hasn't it happened yet? Do we know?
Yeah, Trump ran on the issue. He won the parent vote by 9 points after running on the issue consistently. And he also won the education vote. There was Atlas Intel polling right before Election Day showing Trump beating Kamala Harris on education, which for you and me, it might be like, well, that's a no-brainer. He's on the side of parents. But for decades, Democrats have had a double-digit advantage on the issue of education because they were seen as the party that was just going to throw more money at the problem. But there's been a paradigm shift, a seismic shift to the right on education, with Trump winning the education vote. But as far as where we're at in the process of getting rid of the Department of Education, um, first of all, he started with an executive order. I was at the White House at the signing of this executive order to return education to the states, to disband the Department of Education. The problem is, for better or for worse, with the government that we have and the Constitution that we have in the United States, we have this thing called the separation of powers. There's only so much that the executive branch can do. They can't just snap their fingers and totally get rid of a department that was created by an act of Congress. It requires an act of Congress to fully get rid of it. I will say, but there are things that Trump can do. He can manage the executive branch and federal agencies as the chief executive, and the Supreme Court just ruled on his side that he could continue with mass firings at the Department of Education. So they greenlit the firing of over 1,300 employees at the Department of Education. So that's a step in the right direction. Linda McMahon, I thought she was going to get in there and body slam that unconstitutional department once and for all. I was hoping that would be the case, but she's at least trying to kill it from the inside, give it death by 1,000 cuts by scaling it back. So you could do that through the budget process. You could do that through the hiring and firing process. And they've also stopped millions of dollars in grants to DEI initiatives that were coming from the Department of Education. So these are all steps in the right direction. It's not as we should burn that institution to the ground and salt the earth. It should have never been created in the first place. The proof is in the pudding. The outcomes have not improved as they've thrown more money at the problem. And it requires, you might say, well, we have Congress. We have a majority Republican Congress, House and Senate, and the president's a Republican. So why hasn't it been voted on to destroy it? Well, in the House, you only need a super simple majority, so we could do it there. And I'd
Yeah.
say they should do it just to show that they can. They haven't yet. But the Senate has something called the filibuster, where you need a three-fifths majority to stop the filibuster, to do something that they call invoking cloture. So you need 60 votes in the Senate. Guess how many votes the Republicans have? There are 53 Republicans in the Senate. Even if you had a tiebreaker with JD Vance, that's only 54. You need 60. You're not going to get 6 Democrats or 7 Democrats to come along, because they are a wholly owned subsidiary of the teachers union, and Randy Weingarten stomping her feet like more than anybody else on the issue of the Department of Education. In fact, the NEA at their annual convention this year, which I leaked those resolutions to the public because a disgruntled member sent them to me. There's actually a handful of conservatives in the union, believe it or not. And they sent them to me, and I blasted them all over X. And these unions are like cockroaches. They used to make these things public until we shined a spotlight on them, and they go scurrying away. They make them private now. But they passed a resolution to declare any move at towards abolishing the Department of Education racist. I mean, it's getting old, isn't it? I mean, anything I don't like is either racist or sexist or fascist is their new fun word. When it's just really backwards, because fascists, and historically speaking, have typically liked government control of education, because then they can brainwash the public to like their authoritarian way of doing things. And you saw Mussolini liked compulsory government education, for example. You can go to other examples as well. But if anyone's the fascist, it's the teachers unions who want to trap poor kids in their failure factories that they call public schools. And if they're going to call the Department of Education being abolished racist, they got that backwards too, because we have such horrible track record for minority kids in this country, and the Department of Education has not closed the gap. The achievement gaps have gotten worse in some cases. And if you look at New York City, they spend about $40,000 per kid per year in their public school system, and only about 15% of Black kids in New York City are proficient in math. That is a failure of the system, not of the children. And so the unions should take responsibility for this. They're never going to do it. They're going to point fingers at everything else, and they're going to say 40,000 isn't enough. But the thing is, when they get more money, they spend it on hiring more people. It's become more of a jobs program for adults than an education initiative for kids. And we have data on this since 2000. Since 2000, enrollment for students has been flat. It's basically flat. The number of teachers in the system has increased by about 10%, and the number of administrators in the system have increased by about 95%. It is insane. You have a superintendent in Virginia I just reported on, makes over more than the president, 430 or so thousand a year, and they're begging for the government to buy them a security guard that costs over $100,000 a year. It's never enough for them. They're so greedy, and that's why they fight against school choice. They want that money attached to the kid to stay in their system. They don't want the kid to be able to take it somewhere else. So instead of doing a better job and saying, well, maybe we should attract our customers, maybe we should make the families happy, they say, no, we're not even going to deal with that. We're not even going to deal with that conversation. We're not going to entertain it. And we're just going to say, no, you can't take the money somewhere else. It belongs to us. But the reality is the funding is meant for educating the child. It should follow them to the school that works best for them, whether that's a public school, a private school, or if the families can figure out homeschooling, they should be able to have that funding too. It's their money. It's not the government's money.
Yeah. There are so many parallels. I was just in my mind thinking of that curve with like doctors and patients and mid-levels and administrators just skyrockets.
Same
There's
thing.
so many parallels between what's happening in medicine and what's happening in education right now. And giving it back to the states is hopefully one of those things that's going to right the ship. You wrote a book about this. It is called The Parent Revolution. You got it
Got
right there.
three behind me.
Yeah. Yes.
And Trump endorsed it.
Yes, I saw that. So tell us, who needs to get that book and what is it going to teach them?
It's called The Parent Revolution. It's a national bestseller. Trump did endorse it. So did Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and a bunch of other people. Ted Cruz, my home state senator from Texas, he says on the back that you can ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book. I did dedicate it to her
Oh,
for
nice.
doing more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined. I'm not kidding about that. In the very front of the book, I do dedicate it to her, unless she found my book and ripped out the page. But to Randy Weingarten and the teachers unions, it's
Love it.
backwards on the screen. But
Yeah.
anyway, I sent her a book. She never endorsed it. But what's
Oh, bummer.
really weird is her book just came out
Mhm.
and the cover looks exactly like mine. I don't know if you can
Saw that.
it's insane. I posted it on X, but the colors that are the same, the font's the same,
Let
but
me see if I
the red word is not parent in her book. The red word is fascist.
I've
So
got
is she calling parents fascist? It seems like it.
let me
Um,
there you go.
there it is. Weird, weird.
Weird.
So look, she's tripling down on anti-parent sentiment. Go ahead. And she made her name really big. She thinks she's more important than she is. I guess that's the only difference. Um, but I guess all is fair in love and war, because I put the communist fist on the front of mine
Yeah,
because it's a reference to the radicals ruining our schools. They're trying to infiltrate the school system, so I called them out that way. But yeah, you can get on Amazon. It's like 40% off right now. Get it while it's hot, and get an extra copy and send it to Randy. I'm sure she'll be happy about that.
I'm sure she will. So if people are like, I'm on board, I haven't, I'm so glad I met Corey and I'm exposed to what he's talking about. Where can people follow you? Where can they find you? How can they support what you're doing?
Yeah, follow me on X. It's at DeAngelis Corey. Follow me on Instagram. It's at Corey DeAngelis. So they're flipped. You'll figure it out when you search for me.
Mhm.
But you can also help. I just started a new teachers union tip line. So I get a lot of these DMs usually with different crazy stories of what's happening in the public school system. And sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you go to my website, AmericanCultureFoundation.org, you'll find my teachers union tip line, AmericanCultureFoundation.org. You can anonymously send me information. You can attach your name to it if you want. I'm not going to share your identity. And look, this is how we win the war. We shine a spotlight on the problem.
Mhm.
AmericanCultureFoundation.org.
Perfect. So, we're getting to final thoughts now. Is this whole system broken? If you're a parent and you're worried about this, maybe you're new to like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was happening. What is your best next step after you buy the book?
Look at your state's policies and see if you have a school choice initiative, and if that allows you to vote with your feet somewhere else, you should look into taking advantage of that. Try to figure out homeschooling. I mean, one of the blessings of the pandemic, a silver lining, if you will, was that families got a taste of homeschooling in some way or another. It wasn't pure homeschooling; it was forced, it was involuntary, it was kind of government schooling at home. But some families said, "Okay, I'll just try homeschooling instead." And they got really confident, and people who would have never tried it started to figure it out and say, "Oh, we can do this." And over 1 million kids have left the public school system since 2019. A lot of them are never coming back because they saw better alternatives. So to try it out, if you can make it happen. And if your state doesn't have a lot of options, tell your legislators you want school choice. One, the low hanging fruit right now, if you're in a blue state, is to tell your governors to opt into the big, beautiful bill provision for nationwide school choice. It's solely in their hands. They cannot blame anybody else any longer. They can't blame the Democrat controlled House. They can't blame the Democrat controlled Senate. And I just called out Josh Shapiro and JB Pritzker in the Wall Street Journal the other day, and because they both ran on school choice support in 2022 when they were running for governor. And now they cannot, they have no excuses anymore. And the decision is in their hands. So look, you start there, you get the big, beautiful bill provision in your state. And it might turn out to be like the highway funding 21 drinking age thing, which all states have a 21 drinking age. And a lot of people don't know this, but the reason is it's not a federal mandate. There's federal funding tied to that decision. with highway funding. And so all states kind of chose to do 21 to get the money. But this you kind of have this situation happening with the school choice bill. The original version didn't have an opt-in; it went directly to parents. But now there was the Senate parliamentarian who was appointed by a Democrat, which I don't know why she still has a job. John Thune should get rid of her. But in order to get it back into the bill, Ted Cruz, I think, negotiated a deal to say, okay, well, at least here, this is what we'll concede. We'll let the states opt in, and the governors will get to decide. I think the parents should be the ones deciding, not the governors. They shouldn't be able to limit opportunity, but that's where we're at with it. And I think once more of the blue states start to opt into this provision, it'll become less of a heavy lift for state level policies to enact school choice as well, not just in red states, but in blue states. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to parent pressure. Politicians, look, for better for worse, it's for worse. They care more about power than logic. So you can scream at Democrats all day long that this is a bipartisan issue. You can tell them that this is an equalizer for the least advantaged more than anybody else. You can tell them left-leaning arguments for school choice, and they might agree with you in private, but then when it comes to the vote, they'll side with the party because they're scared of the teachers union. They need to be scared of you more than they are of the unions. And look, the parents have shown that they can become a political juggernaut. We saw this with the National School Boards Association after they labeled parents as terrorists. 26 states were pressured by parents to leave the National School Boards Association. So if you lock arms, if you join a coalition to fight back, you can beat the unions at their own game. And parents are showing that works in red states. Hopefully some blue states come along as well. So I think that's the call to action for parents to get involved. These are your kids, not anybody else's. And even if you don't have kids, this shapes the direction of the country. Um, and I don't know of a more important issue. You might care about taxes. You might care about crime. It all starts with the brainwashing in the school system. Even if you don't have kids, this will affect you. So get involved.
Yeah, that gave me chills because I totally agree with you. So, Corey, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best of luck in what you're doing. I hope you'll come back and update us again in the future as things unravel and move, hopefully, in a better direction. So, take care and God bless.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Molly.
Yep. And thank you for tuning in to listen to another episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show. Till next time, we'll see you then.